for those docs who are doing the amputations. Well, that's just straight out a lie. It is meant to get people all emotionally involved, and it's hard to correct a statement for anybody who's heard one statement and hope that they're going to get the correction later on. The AMA immediately went out and started releasing press releases telling people that, wait a minute, the government determines what we can charge for any procedure. An amputation runs about $1,000 to $2,000. Nowhere near $30,000 or $50,000. Now that's either incredibly naive on the president's part or it's completely disingenuous. Neither one bodes well for us. Or it's a lie. The bottom line is he's done the same thing, and let me share something else with you. Remember when 3962 was finally passed? There was an amendment that was put in called the Pitts-Stupak Amendment. And that was a ban on any federal funds going to insurance plans that cover abortions. Let me read to you briefly something that the president said well before this came down the pipe. On August 20th, he specifically stated there are no plans under health reform to revoke the existing prohibition on using federal tax dollars for abortions. Nobody is talking about changing the existing provision, the Hyde Amendment. Let's be clear about that. It's just not true. Subsequently, on September 9th, he said, one more misunderstanding I want to clear up. Under our plan, no federal dollars will be used to fund abortion. What is telling is the rejection of all pro-life amendments and intentional wording to have the funds come directly from the U.S. Treasury. So he knew darn well, as did everybody in Congress who had any brains at all, they knew this bill was going to change the issue in terms of funding of abortions with federal dollars. They came right out and said it would not do it, but they knew that it would, and in fact, when push came to shove and he didn't have enough votes, they finally conceded and took the wording that guaranteed that the Hyde Amendment would stay intact and that federal dollars would not be used for that. Now, whether you approve of abortions or not, what you need to recognize is, if they had been honest, that amendment never would have been needed. And of course, when it passed, the pro-choice folks were livid because they knew that this law was going to change the abortion funding practices in this country. People have not been honest. Watch what they do, not what they say. Let me just close by saying, this bill is absolutely horrible. It is not going to accomplish more comprehensive care. It is not going to provide care for those that are uninsured the way that it is intended. Wise people know that change is not good enough. What we need is improvement, and I think more people recognize that change is inadequate today than a year ago this time. Change can be bad as well as good. Hope is not sufficient. I've said it before, I think everybody in the Olympic Committee recognizes that now. But you all can't sit around and hope that we're going to have enough clinicians to provide care. You can't sit around and hope that the government isn't going to take over health care, because the competition that's set up here is not competition. When they tell you we want to have more competition and we need this government-based plan to do that, we have about 400 plans out there. 401 is not going to make it more competitive. That is exactly the opposite of what this will do. It will put a non-competitive, government-supported plan out there that will run the rest of them out of business. You will have less primary care providers, you're going to have less physicians that are out there to provide that care, and you will not have what Congress has right now, the Federal Employee Health Benefits Plan, where they get 25 different options. Most of your employers give you one or two, thanks to the Stabilization Act, and I can assure you, it's not based on what is best for you or your family. The employer has a different motivation for what couple of choices you get if you get 2 or 3 choices. If you want to make healthcare better, you want to make it more competitive, you want to make it cheaper, get the government out of regulating the insurance industry the way they're doing it, get it out of mandating things, like this bill mandates testing that everybody recognizes isn't necessary, but every insurance provider has to provide it. If you're an insurance provider and you want to cover a niche group, say you wanted to provide insurance for Catholic priests, yet the bill says you've got to provide mammograms. Exactly. The other thing that I worry about is when the government gets involved, my job becomes much more difficult. It's not just that the government mandates a lot. This creates 100+ new bureaucracies. That means much more paperwork for me and for my office. The other aspect with which we have to deal is we have to recognize that they will put things forward. All of you have heard about the United States Preventive Services Task Force about mammograms. Yesterday, you needed to have mammograms from 40 and on every other year, and you were supposed to do self-examinations. Today, it's 50 and beyond, and you don't do self-examinations any longer. You will lose the ability to make those choices. And in H.R. 3962, one of the things that it says is if you don't do certain things and your costs are too high, you're going to get a 10% cut in your reimbursement. That's a musical chairs scenario. Everybody's going to be in that 10%, or somebody's going to be in that 10% every time, and eventually you're going to get to so much of a reduction in terms of reimbursement, nobody's going to stay in business. The mandates that will be out there for us that we will have to provide this or we'll have to provide that, or worse, we would be restricted. Some of you are over the age of 65. You may know that you can't get an immunization for H1N1 because you're not in the priority immunization group. Why is that? You've been told that that's because you are less likely to have the virus. You may be less likely to have it, but an article in this past month published in The Lancet, the most widely circulated medical journal in the world, showed that people over the age of 65 die in 1 out of 10 cases. They have the highest mortality of anyone. And those people are not eligible for this vaccine. We don't have enough vaccine because guess what? We didn't order enough, and we haven't had enough down the pipeline, so even those that are first priority oftentimes are not getting it. You rely on the government alone and you don't allow free competition to get in there, you are going to have some problems, and we are in real trouble if we sit by and we let this stuff happen. I've talked way longer than I usually do, and you can tell I'm overly passionate tonight. Remember Dylan Thomas? Rage against this kind of legislation. Thank you all very much.